what I'm going to do now is take my concept and begin the proxy process, and we'll first start with there it is. First start with the kind of block out of the entire landscape, and then I will show how to bring a piece of the block out and make the lizard, which would be done in ZBrush. So the first thing I'll do is show how to kind of, I would approach a proxy in Maya, which is just simply blocking out everything from a camera perspective. So the first thing I got to pay attention to is scale. How big is this scene really going to be? And it's probably going to be pretty big. So let's make sure there's a plane that represents the water. It's really, really large. And then we will, I don't need too many polys on this. Now I want to kind of do something that represents the island, and it can be really simple to begin with, but we'll kind of add details as we go along. Just adding some subdivisions here, and then kind of break up something. So the islands in this scene, they're kind of cliffs. There's not a whole lot of rendering in here, but they're essentially it's just these archipelagos of these cliff, almost, what's the word, the volcanic islands, the atoll is what they call them. The atolls are when a volcanic island is created and the volcano disappears, but there's still these islands kind of floating around. Atoll. Is that how do you spell it? Atoll? No, that's a guy. Let's see, I'm probably spelling it wrong. No, atoll. There's a lot of these islands in the Pacific because of all the volcanoes over the years, and what you usually get is kind of a volcano in the middle, but the volcano dies and it sinks, and so you end up with this ring of interesting beaches, and then sometimes they start disappearing, and then you just have like these kind of cliffs that are scattered, and so I want like this to be kind of an edge of an atoll, and a little ship shows up. And all I want to do now is just kind of build a thought, that my thought process of this is the water, there's some islands, and then get the camera angle right, and then I'll figure out what scale I want this lizard, and then we can create the lizard shape. I'm just going to add a blend for the water. Blends are really cheap old shaders, and the reason why I'm doing this is I don't need any Arnold shading yet. I just want something that is contrast from the upper and lower, the sea and the islands, just to have some sort of contrast. So I'm just kind of breaking up some islands. We'll can model them more specifically later on. We can also use tiles to kind of populate the texture on them. But eventually we get to a place where there's a cliff coming at me, and that will match this shape of the composition that I have. And then, let's kind of scale this up a little bit. We can start to, I love to use the modeling toolkit. If anybody hasn't noticed, the multi-cut, my favorite tool, holding on control, you can add edge loops. And now I can start to kind of zero in on one spot and see if this works for my composition. Something like that. That's kind of what I'm thinking. Maybe this comes out a little more like this, and that out a little more like this. There will be a boat in there, but I have a boat that I might end up using, but the boat can just be represented by a simple block with some really simple conceptual sails. So just really quickly, I want something that represents this world, but I don't need to overthink anything. What I'm doing at this point is I'm trying to figure out my scale. That's why I'm doing this. What is the size of everything? If the boat is big, how big is this lizard? All that stuff. And I don't need anything to be that detailed or interesting, just kind of creating a world that I can use as a reference for doing the modeling later on. So there's a little boat in there, very, very simple. Would love it to be more interesting, but that'll do for now. And then figure out like maybe this is the plane for the lizard and do a mesh smooth here, add some details so I can kind of work out some sort of cliff. And then if that's going to be my cliff, um, that could, yeah, right around here probably, and then we'll bring this down a little. So this is should work for my composition, which I'll put up in the other window, other monitor, so I can read it. Um, okay. And then the next stage is getting some sort of simple shape so I understand what scale the lizard's going to be. So if it's the head, maybe not thinking about anything specific, just the size of the head. We can have a body shape here. And then what I will do once I'm like happy with the scale is I'm going to take this reference into ZBrush and I will model it using ZSphere. So this is kind of cool. Okay, so it's maybe a giant lizard, and this ship is coming to kind of take a look at it. And so yeah, I like the scale. So let's what I can do is kind of zero out the the actual um, lizard. So this is the scale I want. Nothing interesting there. The thing has like spines and everything, but I'm not really doing much of that. Just wanted to show the scale. Probably has a tail too that goes back this way. But I don't need any detail. This is just a scale reference. Once I'm happy with that, let's save this project. Yeah, so what I wanted to do was take this, and now that I'm like happy with the kind of block out of the proxy, let's put I'll duplicate it and then put this in the center of the world, because as we might be aware by now, it's a lot easier to sculpt something in the center of the world symmetrically than off in some random direction. So you see, I'm putting it at the center of the grid so that I can work on it in ZBrush, not off in some random weird angled direction. This way I have a scale and we can use symmetry to create all this. Cool. And so we should have time to get something into ZBrush. I'll export this out as a scale reference for the lizard. As an OBJ would be fine. Okay, and then now I'm going to open up ZBrush, and what we're going to do today is talk about how to approach proxy with ZBrush, which we haven't done before in this class. And there's some cool things you can think about with ZBrush and proxying is essentially I've showed in the past how to bring in import geometry and add a little detail. If you start with like any of these base cylinders, you do need to make them a polymesh 3D. And then what we can do if we want them to have more detail, you can turn on Dynamesh. I just want to point out there's a big difference between Dynamesh and Z-Remesher. The major difference is Dynamesh matches your form really closely, but Z Remesher does a better job of uh, creating the details of the form. So or sorry, it does a better job of creating the polygon flow. So Dynamesh, you see it matches the form almost exactly, but it's all funky. There's all these zigzags and issues. Whereas if you did a Z remesher, usually does a really clean shape or clean geometry, but it doesn't always do it in the right way. Like this one is kind of twisted, and you see these lines aren't all up and down. It's better than the Dynamesh, but there's all kinds of ugly stars and things that I wouldn't model. So both of them are good, but they do have their limitations. But when you're doing proxy, you don't really care about the polygons. All we care about is the form. So I'm totally fine using Dynamesh for the proxy here. So Dynamesh could be done very easily. We can get a lot of shapes with the proxy here. There's other systems I love to kind of create the shape where I want, like clip curve. That's shift and control gives you the geometry affecting tools. And clip curve is great because it just kind of flattens things out. If you're doing things like crystals, sometimes this is helpful, but I like knife curve even better for crystals. Let's get this material off. Because knife curve, rather than squishing things to a flat plane like clip curve does, knife curve will actually cut and give you another poly group, but it cuts it so cleanly that it's really good for doing facets for crystals and things like that. You can see it starts to look like a crystal pretty quickly, just cutting into the model, and all of a sudden it's no longer a cylinder. It really has a lot of this fun um, kind of geometric chiseled look. So really fun. You can do rocks this way. You can do all kinds of fun stuff that way. But since I'm doing an organic creature and it's got symmetry and stuff, I'm going to show how to use Z-spheres to create something that has symmetry, appendages, all these things. So let's go to the tool palette, and I'm going to import my scale reference so I can start with something that makes sense in my scene and is in the center of the world. Okay, so here it is, really boring, even off kilter. That's fine, it's just reference. But what we'll do, it's a subtool. It's only one subtool here. It's already kind of set up there. I'm going to append a Z-sphere, and then I'm going to hit X to make sure that the symmetry is on. Looks like I kind of made the guy facing the wrong direction. You can switch it over to Z symmetry, and that would be right. But most characters are made with the symmetry being on X. So what I'm going to do, rather than try to mash everything to a different ratio, I'm just going to rotate the scale to the X direction. So Z is going through the body and X is left and right. And that way I can start with symmetry with X. So if I click solo and we're just looking at the Z sphere, you see this weird looking pill shape or like Pokemon ball thing. And if you notice, if you draw anywhere with a small brush, it'll create these extra Z spheres. And then that's with the draw tool, which is Q, and then M, the move tool, and then E, the scale tool. I use these when making Z sphere models pretty quickly. So first off, I do need kind of the spine. So before I have any appendages, we need to figure out that spine, how big it is, and I'll start by just making drawing another Z-sphere in the center. That'll be kind of the head. Maybe this one here, I scale it down, and then we'll make another one for the tail and make sure it snaps in the center so that there's not two of them. And then I'm going to move it out. So this is just the initial block out of the body. We don't even really have a head yet. It's just kind of maybe moving towards the direction of the neck. But if you hit A, it'll automatically Dynamesh. What it's doing, it's called adaptive skin, and it's Dynameshing your Z-spheres, so you could actually think of it as an object. You can change the resolution if you want, but this resolution is probably fine for what I'm doing. Now I need to kind of get the head into a better shape so it matches my concept more. So I'm going to add another Z-sphere up here. This will be the neck down here. And then I'll add one for the kind of lengthiness of the face. And notice I'm doing everything totally symmetrically and down the center, trying not to make it wiggle because it's going to be a lot easier to do everything symmetrical. Now, I have to think about the legs. So we probably could put some arms here. That would make sense, but I have nowhere to put arms in the back, so I do need to click somewhere around here, creates a new Z-sphere. This will be the hip joint, and then the tail joint could be a lot longer because I didn't really specify how long this tail was. Now, hit A, you can see it's like starting to turn into something. And let's put perspective on so we can kind of see it in 3D. So, okay, it looks like, the tadpole kind of evolutionary beginning of this thing. You notice when you hit A, it's just turning the Z sphere into this. Eventually, I will so click make adaptive skin, and it should create a new tool up here that is just the Dynamesh model, not the Z-sphere model. But before I get there, I'm going to make sure I have legs, because that is the most important thing here is with the Z-spheres is creating appendages. That's what it's really good at. So I'm going to add two kind of scapula joints, and we'll add some, this would be the humerus joint. We'll kind of bring it back a little bit, move this forward. It's going to have some kind of claws, and we'll draw one more for the claws. I can add details of the claws later. Just really want some appendage so that I can get a nice structure started. Then there's like a fin on the top. The fin is really, really small. But what we do have is there's lots of these little cylinders kind of going up. But I think I can add those later just using an insert cylinder. And I just want the appendages for the Z-sphere. I think of the Z-sphere as like creating an armature. You're not really needing it to be the details that you want. You just want something that is somewhat relating to the physical appendage anatomy. So now we just need a kind of what is this? The heel joint and then the foot joint down here. And so something along these lines, creating a little bit of some sort of reality of the joints, but we don't have to think about it too much because most of the work will be done in the sculpting process. I just need the appendages kind of blocked out. So now that I'm here, we do have like there's three appendages on the top, so maybe I do small little things off the top just to get these antenna type things going, something like that. And then that gives me a good base, and then I'll work on adding a fin and the spines with a different system. But this gives me a good place to start. It's nice because I can see the head pretty clearly. So now what I'll do is I'll go to adaptive skin and I'll say make adaptive skin. It pops this out. This looks like it's all Dynamesh and good to go. I just need to kind of block out the overall shape a little better. Maybe give it the jaw. We've got the kind of eye socket area, and make sure that I have symmetry on. I did not, so I'm going to leave some of that. There are ways if you don't have symmetry on, you can go into geometry and say under modified topology, you can say mirror and weld, but sometimes it mirrors the wrong side. If it does, and you really like that side, you can under, deformation, you can mirror the whole object and then use geometry, mirror and weld. And now we've got both sides working, but you do want to hit X and make sure that symmetry is on when you're doing these kind of characters anyway. So I'm just going to kind of block in rough shape. If I turn on Dynamesh, which looks like it's already on, you notice how I kind of lose my geometry. It gets a little funky there. If you hold down Control and drag down, it'll redistribute the polys. It just totally redistributes the polys anywhere where it's stretching and kind of fixes that. And it's a good way to start, but eventually it isn't enough information. Uh, so a lot of times what I'll do is I'll block out most of this in Dynamesh, and then when I'm ready, I will switch over to ZRemesh, which gives me a lower resolution model. But what you can do is divide this. Dynameshes don't divide very well because you'll notice Dynameshes have a lot of triangles and stars and weird things, whereas ZRemesher does have mostly quads. It's just all quads. And it might not be perfect, but if it's symmetrical and it's quads, you can usually divide it and kind of start your model this way, especially for um, proxy. This works really well to get started. But before I move on, I'm going to add the spines. They can be done very easily with an insert mesh brush. I'm just going to use the capsule, grab it in the center line. You get one, rotate it. Hold down Alt to move the pivot point and scale it up a little bit. And okay, so that's about kind of the scale of the capsule is a little thinner. For the spines, this should work. And then I'll hold down Control. And if the cool thing in when you don't have any divisions and you're still using Dynamesh, you can just kind of hold down Control. And if everything else is masked, you can hold down Control and drag the unmasked area, and it will copy it. And that way I can kind of quickly make these spines in the distribution that I want, kind of getting smaller until it gets to about here. Then let's isolate this one. Okay, let's do this. I'm just holding Shift and Control to click on different polygroups to see them quicker. Now Control and drag will continue the spines going down the back and kind of continue them as they get smaller and smaller. And maybe there's some kind of cool Stegosaurus type thing at the end. They call it the Thagomizer, based off of a Far Side comic. That was the origins of the back of the Stegosaurus. They have this spiky thing in the back, and they never had a word for it. But Gary Larson did a comic, The Far Side, in the 80s, and he said that's called the Thagomizer, based off of Thad or something, and they actually named it that in the scientific books. So if you're really good at cartooning and making funny stuff, sometimes you can get science names after you. Maybe the legs should kind of both be on the ground just to show that it can work as a land monster. But I will do a lot more work to the feet. Here, these objects are separate at the moment, but if you hold down Control and do another Dynamesh, they all connect. And that could be great. That's kind of what I wanted. The other thing is I did have there's the fin. So I didn't just have spines. There's also this translucent fin. To translucent, well, come on, ZBrush, stop doing that. There we go. This translucent fin that goes in between the spines. And I didn't want to make that too quickly because I really wanted those spines to come together before we got too far with the fin. So, okay. And then one way to create the fin would be the same way I created the spines, just add an insert brush, maybe a sphere, and then get it in the center. And then what I can do is kind of flatten it out and drag it and scale it so that it kind of matches the fin shape. Notice I don't care at all about the polys. Polys are hideously bad or at the moment, but if you just do a Dynamesh, all the poly issues will disappear. But I'm noticing I'm a little too thick, so let's thin it out a little more so you can still see the spine, something like that. So yeah, polys are terrible, but if you hold down Control, drag, the polys are redistributed, and now this is much more in line with my concept. Now, this is still pretty nasty looking geo. There's also like no um, claws or anything like that, so I do have to kind of pull out some claws. But eventually, once I get all of the form locked down, I usually move on to the turning it into a Z-remesher because I'm going to get better results from Z-remeshing a model than Dynameshing a model if I want detail. I know it seems like Dynamesh does great for detail, but only in the beginning. And you notice every time I do a Dynamesh, we lose a little information. So anytime you kind of hold down Control and drag, sometimes things get a little funkier, a little less defined. So I try to not use Dynamesh necessarily for my final model, but Dynamesh for my proxy for I'm just blocking everything out. Usually these lizards have really weirdly big rib cages. Anyway, we're getting to a point where class is almost over. I want to just leave it open for anybody to ask any questions. You can see there's some ugly spots here. No problem. It's all just Dynamesh roughed out. And yeah, so there might be one more fin I put in the back, but at a certain point, this will be good enough for like a quick proxy for just the animators to know kind of our shapes. Eventually, we need more information to get it to really look right, and then uh, we kind of continue on. So I say proxies are like this. They're about there. Maybe show some fingers first, but we don't need too much info. But once we're kind of happy with it, I don't just leave it like this and start dividing it or modeling it on it. I usually will do a Z-remesher, and the process of moving into the high res is dividing this, and then at sometimes I'll show some systems of um, adding even more detail into the polys that we need. But now I could start to use clay buildup. I'm not adding scales yet. I'm not adding, too much detail or color. But the next stage, which I will do next week, is after we look at the critiques of the proxies that everybody's working on, I want to start adding color. And we can start with just the standard brush and turning on RGB rather than using it to sculpt. You can just begin with a standard brush, painting some color on. This green is not great. It's a little too saturated. Maybe make it a little brighter. So yeah, start somewhere like this. And then when we get into areas of detail, there's a couple of different ways I want to show how to do that. Some we can do directly by hand. Others we can do with alpha brushes and masks. But you can see how quickly you can kind of rough out a proxy and then say, all right, we don't need full detail in a proxy. We just want to make sure that we have the idea of the form of the character. Most importantly, the silhouette feels like what we want it to feel like. So I will continue working on this until I have a proxy that I'm totally happy with. But this is a good start. And then next week, I'll show how to use the vertex paint to get all of the complicated color that we have in our references, which are much more sophisticated than this. So I will go next week, move into the high res part of it, and that's when we start looking at the super details and how to make the color give us exactly what we want. I also will show how to paint a human face at some point with this system, the vertex color system, because obviously just painting an airbrush with the standard brush, yeah, you can get color on there, but it looks terrible. Eventually, we'll start to use alphas. We can totally take the scales of an image like this and create alpha maps from it, and that'll help us create the physical scales and the color as well. So before I just kind of move on and stop talking, I want to show just one thing that's really, really important when you're doing this kind of modeling. Every brush, you usually need to turn off backface mask. It's under auto masking. Turn backface mask on. This way, if I'm working on one side, I'm not also working on the other side. If I turn off symmetry, you can see that I don't accidentally cut through the other side. But when we finally get to it, I'm going to show how to get the subsurface scattering, translucency of the fin, the details of the scales, and all of the color as well. But this week, I just want people working on the proxy. So thanks, everybody. We'll start to wrap it up. If you do have any questions, feel free to start talking about that now. But otherwise, I can't wait to see the proxies next week. And if you do run into any issues, any questions, I'm always available on Teams, and I can meet on Mondays for longer meetings. Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Got symmetry there.